Hello, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Flashback Files. Today's guest is Andrea. She is an occupational therapist working in brain injury, mental health, and addictions. In this conversation, we go back to the moments that shaped her path, being the youngest of four, navigating uncertainty in high school and university, recovering from concussions, and how those early experiences quietly guided her toward a career built on empathy, evidence, and real world care. If you've ever felt behind or unsure, this one will land. And I just want to take a moment to address the unflattering video angle on my part. I had some tech issues to work through. I believe they say the show must go on. So it did. Welcome back to Flashback Files, where in this series we aim to help students, recent grads, and young professionals reflect on how early experiences shape confidence, identity, and leadership. Today we have Andrea, someone I've known for years through one of my best friends and her older brother, Jay. Andrea has a strong academic and clinical presence. She is someone who bridges research, mental health, neural rehab, and real-world care together. This episode may land for students navigating the balancing of ambition, relationships, uncertainty, who may be exploring healthcare career paths, and those who may be entertaining the idea of graduate school. It just so happens that Andrea is Sergio's partner. Sergio joined me on the Flashback Files episode titled Grounded Ambition, which published December 8th, 2025. Andrea, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Josh.
Before we dive into the education and professional stuff, can you please share with our listeners just maybe a little bit about you, hobbies, interests?
Yeah, so as you said, Andrea, I live in Toronto with my husband Sergio and our cat. And yeah, outside of work, I just really enjoy being outdoors as much as possible, going for walks and hikes. And I also enjoy drawing and trying new creative pursuits as well.
Excellent. So, Andrea, as I've mentioned, I've known you for quite a while. It's incredible just to see what you've done since the time I've met you to now. One of the great things about this podcast is just further getting to know an individual such as you. I know you as Jay's little sister, Andrea, and now here you are, the young professional doing big things. So let's go back to when you were a little bit younger. So being the youngest of four siblings, what do you think shaped you as a person, being the youngest of those? Like, what shaped you early on?
Yeah, it's interesting to have to think about it being like the youngest one. I think, yeah, I got to kind of witness my siblings go through adolescence and adulthood. And I got to absorb a lot of the pop culture that they did as well. So, music, shows, sports, their interests, which I think rubbed off on me a little bit. And it's nice to share that with them. I think I followed in my siblings' footsteps in terms of going into sports in school. So I play basketball and volleyball. Definitely, I think got into that because of them. Like if we hadn't been an athletic family, I might not have tried that out in school. But I think having a big age gap between my siblings, I also got to learn how to enjoy my own solitude as well. So while my siblings were off with their friends or in school and I was at home, I got to enjoy, time to be in my own head and be creative and read books. So I think there's definitely a mix of an influence from my older siblings, but also shaping my own individual path as well.
Well put. So when you think about sports, so influenced by your older siblings, was there like a rooted passion or did you really enjoy doing the sports, or was there maybe an approval seeking mechanism there that consciously or subconsciously that you weren't aware of that at least started your journey in sports?
I'm sure there was some subconscious, wanting to like I also can do this. But I think there was just a passion, yeah, that I felt drawn towards it. I think if there wasn't that passion and it was just a wanting to do the same thing or an approval, I probably wouldn't have stuck with it or been any good at it. So but yeah, it was nice to have, my older brothers and my older sister there to cheer me on. But yeah, I think I was really driven and really competitive when I was younger, so that helped.
Amazing. So you might have touched on one of the characteristics that you still have today, but when you look back at yourself as a kid or a teenager, what traits were already there that you still see today?
I think I wouldn't say I'm competitive today.
Okay.
Definitely, that's definitely different. I'm, yeah, more like just calm and settled, I would say. But there is a stubbornness that I had as a kid that I think I share with my family members. That is definitely, my husband would tell you today, I'm still very stubborn. I think there's also, like, I have a strong sense of justice. And I always had that as a kid. Like, I distinctly remember witnessing like bullying at school, and I wouldn't be able to sit back and watch it happen. I would stand up against that. And I definitely got that from my family and my mom. So, yeah, strong sense of justice. I still care about things today, and I try to speak out when I can. Um, and then I would say maybe the last thing that I can remember from being younger is, yeah, being really creative. And I think, in terms of writing and music and art. I think when you're a kid, you can kind of do that without so much fear that you have as an adult. And maybe as adults, our attention is pulled away from creative pursuits. But as a kid, like I still have that like draw to creativity, but it's a bit harder as an adult. As a kid, it was more free.
Yeah. Well, our friend Tom.
Mhm.
So Tom has done an episode that will be published in January, and he was talking about the difficulty of keeping that playfulness
Yeah.
and imagination in adulthood, which is a bit sad, in a way. If you hoping we can make a concerted effort to keep that playfulness and imagination, I think that just bodes well for everybody.
Yeah, I like wording it as playfulness. There's
Yeah,
definitely like a tighter need for control as adults. There's just so many expectations and pressures on us, but yeah, finding opportunities to reconnect with that playfulness. I think
yeah,
it's on our minds a lot. A shared a shared experience, yeah.
absolutely. So being surrounded by older siblings, how did that influence your confidence or the way you approach school?
I think, they were always really like supportive and protective of me. So, um yeah, they were pretty good to me, so I didn't have some complex going into school where I felt I needed to prove myself. I felt pretty confident in that respect, but I also think just because of our age gap, I really had to just like explore school kind of on my own. I was at like a different stage in development than my siblings. So, yeah, I think they were all really supportive, but I had to kind of go through it a little bit on my own, and I think having friends around my age was helpful at that time.
Right. Did you attend the independent study high school,
I
Westmount?
did, yeah, so
Yeah,
I did not attend the same high school as my siblings.
got it. And I asked Sergio the same question. What was that like for you? Because that's a different experience to have that independence in high school. How did you take it? And was it a slow adaptation to getting things in on time and that sort of thing? Was it innate in you where you just had a natural ability to work independently like that?
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, always as a kid, I was really drawn to school and learning. I loved school. So I think that helped. Just like having the internal motivation to learn and to complete assignments and projects was helpful. But by no means, like to this day and during high school, by no means was I doing things perfectly on time or, ahead of time, because that was a possibility as a self-paced school. You could fast track is what it was called, but that was not me at all. I was often very late with things, but for me, pressure and deadlines are essential to getting anything done. So when I would get really behind and I would have to catch up in order to not have to carry over a course and do it like an extra semester, that pressure at the end would help me to get things done. So I was definitely doing things on my own time, not following like a typical schedule.
Right. You bring up pressure, which is a great segue into the next question. Having older siblings, seeing them get into their work, their careers, relatively early according to you, because you would have been maybe in high school, maybe even a little bit sooner before that.
Yeah.
Did you feel pressure to keep up or identify what you wanted to do in high school, or did you kind of naturally find your own lane pretty early in terms of knowing what you wanted to do post-secondary?
Yeah, I think what you'll find from talking to me is that there was no lane. I was on no lane. I was very much confused and lost a lot of the time, and I think I really, like, admired the paths my siblings were on in terms of, their interests and their jobs and their relationships, and, it was cool to have older siblings with cars and doing cool things, but I think I was just, like, really in my own head, and so I had to yeah, I admired what they did, but it wasn't something that gave me a clear path forward. I was really trying to figure out, like, who am I? What do I want to do? I was really driven by, like, my own interests, I think.
Right. Okay. So then you get to the final year of high school and it's time to pick a program.
Mhm.
How did that process? What was your mindset as you approached which programs to choose in university?
Yeah, I'm really indecisive. I have a really hard time making decisions, so I tend to tread the middle line a lot, and if I'm not again, I'm pretty stubborn, so if I'm not, really sure of something, I probably won't do it, and so that's what I did, actually. So by the time I was in the last year of high school, grade 13 was not mandatory anymore, but I chose to do it. So I chose to kind of just stick around, try more courses, um, give myself a bit more time to make a decision. So my friends went off to university, but most of them anyway, and I decided to spend some more time finishing up high school and figuring out what I wanted to do.
Good on you for making that decision. It speaks to what you were saying in terms of being in your own head and
Mhm.
being maybe stubborn. But I could see like your cohort going off to university and you being one of maybe a few staying behind. That involves some discipline and not just kind of going with the herd in terms of taking that next step. So then in grade 13, did you start to craft what post-secondary looks like for you then? Like you were able to identify the program and
I think a
where you
little
were.
bit. Yeah, it just gave me more time to one thing I had decided is I wanna stay local. Like, I don't want to travel for university. I want to stay in my hometown, so that made it easy. I kind of looked at what McMaster had to offer and decided, what am I most drawn to, and it ended up being, at first, environmental science. So, again, I mentioned in the beginning, like, I'm really passionate about the outdoors, about nature, and I have a strong sense of justice. So I wanted to do something that would help the environment. So I ended up just kind of following, again, my interests and like my passions. But I didn't have like a career in mind at that point. I was just kind of following what I thought I was interested in.
And then you chose psychology, neuroscience, and behavior. What about that pulled you? Was it kind of the same things and rooted in justice? What was your mindset in terms of taking that on and seeing it as a fit for you?
Yeah, so that was a funny, very formative experience in my life, that transition to that program, because a few things were going on at the time. So actually, in that last year of high school, I was playing basketball. Another reason to stay was to play more sports, but I sustained several concussions during that last year. So actually, my entry to university, I was still trying to recover. I had post concussion syndrome and I my mental health was really poor. So I was really struggling that first year of university. And I think, going through that, I started to develop an interest in, like, wow, the brain matters. Our brains have a big impact on everything we do, how we think, how we perceive the world. So started to become a bit interested in that. And then as part of the environmental science program, I could take electives, and I chose to take psychology. So, kind of by accident, I discovered my interest in psychology. I'd never really thought about it before, but I found it really interesting and decided, I think I want to switch into this. Like, it felt personally meaningful at that point because I was like, my mental health has suffered so much, and maybe I can help with concussion recovery one day. So that's when it like sparked for me, just kind of by accident, like signing up for an elective and it ended up tying into my personal experience.
Amazing. And did you think 5, 10 years down the road in terms of a role that you would take on when you started to take the program? Or did that not come?
I had a vague sense of, maybe I will get into research and try to help find, treatments and solutions for people going through brain injuries or like conditions like dementia. But the program was really research intensive. There was no like therapy or mental health focus when I was in it. There is now. They have an accredited like psychotherapy program. But at the time, like being a clinical professional was not on my radar at all. Yeah.
And so with research, how has that shaped the way you think about things like evidence, uncertainty,
Mhm.
and patience?
Yeah, all those things. Yeah, with research, I'm really, at the time, I think I was frustrated about all this research that I was having to do. But looking back, I'm really grateful because of my ability to really like critically assess evidence. And I think it's more important now than ever in the age that we're in with like a lot of information coming at us. All of my schooling was about, how do we critically interpret evidence? What are the limitations of studies? What goes into developing a research study? And how do we communicate evidence to people? So, yeah, I think all of that, it's really important in the work that I do, but it's also important just as a human being receiving a lot of information every day.
Absolutely. And so research is it something that you thoroughly enjoy? Is it a must-have based on the work that you do? Like, do you enjoy the experience of research?
I think working in research, because I did that for 3 years after undergrad, I think I kind of got enough of it at a certain point. But that being said, integrating research into my work is essential. So, like keeping up with evidence based practices and understanding how to interpret research, it's really important. Yeah, I
Mhm.
don't know if I'd want to just do research full time, but having the opportunity to practice clinically and then collaborate on research is definitely like, again, I like to toe the middle. So that opportunity.
So when you finish your undergrad in that last year, similar to like your last year of high school, did you feel pressure to find a job, get a career, go forward? Can you talk about that final year in terms of what your decision making looked like?
Yeah, again, I think my stubbornness is going to shine through here because I had friends that applied to grad school right out of undergrad. I had friends go to med school, friends do their PhDs. I had friends move on, and I was not ready for that. I was not ready for the next step, didn't really know what to commit to. So I didn't follow in a lot of my friends' footsteps. I kind of took a look at like, okay, what now? What am I qualified for after doing this program? And it was research. A lot of my skills were in, communication, data analysis, research methods. So I ended up applying to hospitals to work in clinical research. So my friends, most of them went off to grad school. I decided to get some work experience, figure out, yeah, what am I interested in? Where do I want to go? What is a career? I did not know at the time.
Okay. And then you slowly decide, I guess, to get your master's? Like when that was after how many years after
Yeah, so I worked
undergrad?
for 3 years in clinical research. And at a certain point, I started to feel like, okay, this is not enough because with clinical research, it's research about improving human health. And so as part of my work, I got to interview people. That's how I was collecting data. I was collecting data through interviews. And so, there was one moment where I was on the phone with a senior who was at home and I was interviewing them about, their health and how things were going. And I just realized in that moment, like, there's very limited amount that I can do for them on this phone call. Like, I'm just collecting their information, but they were so comforted by being able to talk to someone as like an isolated senior that I started to be like, it would be really nice to have skills and to have more to offer them in a way that can help them more. I really, I didn't ever consider med school. I knew I wasn't a right fit for nursing. So, but I think being in a hospital setting, it did give me exposure to other health professions, but I was still filled with self doubt. So I still was like, I'm not good enough to be a clinician. Like, that's a lot of responsibility. But what helped me make the decision was my colleagues, who are now my friends, they really pushed me. They were like, Andrea, we think you'd be a good fit for OT. You should look into this. You should apply, like, get out of here, go do something that you're more passionate about. So I credit them for helping me just give me a kick and help me get going.
Amazing. And I think that's a really interesting point that actually came up in Sergio's interview as well. Is like the people you surround yourself with. So you had some friends that were giving you the motivation, maybe when you didn't have it yourself. Did you have a mentor at all that you gravitated towards, or was it more about the friend group in general?
Yeah, I would say like one of my weaknesses is not seeking out mentorship. Yeah, I didn't really have super strong mentors. I did have people who definitely like helped me out along the way. But it was mostly friends, I would say. Or yeah, people who were maybe in superior positions, but we had more of like a friendship. So yeah, definitely friendship was essential to my journey.
Okay. And when you decide, okay, I'm going to do masters, I hear one of the obstacles was maybe self confidence. What about finances? There are quite a few people that think about, okay, I just got out of 4 year undergrad. I have a substantial student loan. I want to do more education. That costs money. How did you navigate that? Were there any obstacles financially that you needed to overcome, and how did you approach it?
Well, I mean, yeah, definitely obstacles in terms of, living outside my family home, having to think about rent and expenses in one of Canada's most expensive cities, and a professional graduate program, it can be really costly. So that was definitely a concern of mine. But I think what helped is my stubbornness along the way. I lived at home throughout undergrad. I didn't have a lot of the expenses that other people might. And so I was able to save up. I worked before going to grad school. I was able to
Mhm.
save up and then, just giving in to needing some student loans as well and needing that support and not feeling, any shame about that as well.
Right. Good. Take the resources, utilize them when you can, I guess.
Yeah.
So becoming an occupational therapist, I feel like occupational therapy is often misunderstood. So how would you explain what you do to someone who's never heard of it or who may be unclear in terms of what the industry actually entails?
Yeah, I think anyone who doesn't understand it, it's for a good reason. It's not very clear, especially if you don't know an OT or if you've never needed an OT before. Why would you know? The term is not very clear, but one way I can help clarify it is, the term occupational doesn't just mean work, it means what occupies us. So work can be one of those things, but what are the activities that occupy us in our day to day? For an adult, it could be work, it could be parenting, could be all the little day to day activities you have to do to function, right? Feeding yourself, showering, going to the bathroom, all those essential activities. And for kids, what's important to them is play and school, right? So, what happens when life gets in the way of that? When you have an illness or an injury or a disability, and all of a sudden doing what's important to you is just a lot more difficult. So, that's the essence of occupational therapy. It is, a regulated health profession. So, we're often a part of care teams. And yeah, we just come in with creative and evidence based approaches and just try to get people back to doing what they love.
Amazing. And what kind of there's probably a lot of trust that's going to be established between you and the individual that you're working with. Are there any characteristics about yourself that you innately had in terms of, the areas of compassion, that sort of thing? It may be a characteristic that you've kind of grown just as a result of the profession that you're in.
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, what I've realized is even when, still experiencing self doubt throughout my career, but going back to those like essential human qualities that I bring definitely helps. So, yeah, being empathetic and just being patient and helping people feel heard. I think that at the end of the day is what really helps. And something people have told me that I did not realize is that they find me very calming, so all my coworkers, they find me just be very calming presence. So I didn't realize that about myself because in my own head, I have anxious thoughts and I don't always feel at ease. But yeah, being able to help other people feel at ease and feel heard, I think is really important.
Okay, this is a really great opportunity, Andrew. I'm going to take a moment to talk about our tech issues this morning because I think you hit the nail on the head. We had, for everybody listening, I look a little different from an angle perspective. Had tech issues. We're doing this from a, let's say, an alternative recording device. And Andrea was pretty chill throughout the whole thing. We literally started this discussion 30 minutes late. I felt bad, but again, I felt put at ease. So I appreciate your patience and just being compassionate in terms of what was going on this morning. I just had to throw that out there.
Of course.
So just in general, your placements, they've spanned mental health, acute care, neurology, stroke rehab, and concussion recovery. What did that variety teach you about yourself? And maybe tie into your personal experience as it pertains to concussion, like what that might have meant for you.
Yeah. So, in the occupational therapy program, we have to learn like all the fundamentals, anatomy, neuroanatomy. A lot of people go into the program with a kinesiology background. I did not have that. I was definitely more geared towards the like cognitive, mental health, neuro aspect of things. And I think going into placements that had to deal with that really validated like, okay, I feel more at home here than I would, I think, in something really focused purely on physical rehabilitation. So yeah, I just felt validated in again having like a blend or a mix or an opportunity to be creative and to connect with people. So I think the placements overall just really validated that for me.
And which placement challenged you the most emotionally, professionally?
Two of the four placements really, really challenged me. The first one in acute care. So, in one of the city's largest hospitals, acute care is where people go when they're, medically unstable. There's kind of a lot going on, a lot of tubes and wires and beeping. It's like the classic what you'd imagine when you think of a hospital. And that was my first placement. And I was in school during the height of the pandemic. And so things were really like everyone coordinating the placements and everyone at the hospital, everyone was kind of confused at the time. And so I remember, going into placement the first day, and my placement supervisor pulled me aside and said, "Hey, our unit has been turned into a COVID unit. Are you going to be okay with this?" And, we were all kind of, this is when we were tracking the numbers. Like everyone was
Mm.
pretty concerned. And so I had to deal with like my own feelings about it at the time. And, this placement involved a lot of physical hands on skills. And up until this point, all my schooling had been virtual. So it just required a lot of like flexibility, a lot of just like putting my head down and just going with the flow. So that was definitely a challenging experience, but it ended up being okay. But, putting faces to name numbers at the time, we'd seen numbers of like infections and deaths, and I was putting faces to that. So it was a strong experience.
Interesting. And could you, just for people listening, walk us through how you might have prepared yourself to walk in a situation where I can imagine how uncertain you felt, maybe a little bit of fear. Like, how did you temper those emotions, even just going in each day as you were new to the whole thing?
Yeah, I think, there was like anxiety throughout a little. Again, I tend to perform under pressure. And so there was kind of no choice at that point. It's like, if I say no to this, what happens now, right? Do I have to stay extra and figure out what to do missing a placement? There was a pressure there. But also, when the pandemic started, I was working at a hospital. And so I actually had to adapt there as well. And I had to do some frontline screening of people. So I think I just knew, like, okay, wear an N95 mask, follow the procedures, you're going to be okay. And, this is for a short time. This is not forever. So just thinking about, the fact that it's not forever, let's do our best now.
Okay. In general, when you think about just your early days in your career and where you are today, was at what point did you think, okay, I can actually do this?
Probably, I would say it took like a whole year after graduating and entering practice as an occupational therapist. I think there's still self-doubt all the time. But again, what I said, kind of at the end of the day, when I'm like, what am I doing? Am I even good at this? Reconnecting with those strengths that I just bring on a human level, that helps me say, you know what, like I do bring important things to the profession. So even if on a day-to-day basis I'm, not always feeling super competent, I kind of lean back on those qualities.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Now, knowing that we're speaking to students just graduating and maybe entering into their career, how did you find interviewing for new jobs? What was your approach to it? How do you just feel about it? And is there any advice that you could give to people in terms of just approaching interviews for their career roles?
Yeah, so I remember I'll start with out of undergrad because again, I had to be like, what do I even qualify for? And what skills do I bring?
Mhm.
And then I had to, there was the people element of interviews as well. So I think just taking notice of like, what are my strengths in terms of like technical skills, but also what do I bring and how, and again, I think just like making people feel at ease during an interview was something that was helpful as well. So yeah, I would say like reflecting on what you bring as a person, but also as a professional. I think both matter for an interview. And the other thing I would say is, I don't love interviewing. It's a lot of pressure and I think in the moment I can like perform, but leading up to it it's very anxiety inducing. So one thing that I think helped getting into my professional career was leaning on connections. I think a lot of people will tell you this, and this is coming from someone who, again, I did not seek out mentorship. I wasn't very buddy buddy with like professors, or um, I wasn't always very good at seeking out partnerships with my superiors. So that doesn't come naturally to me, but I think along the way, some people saw something in me and they encouraged me. And then that's what helped me to form deeper connections and get like a foot in the door that way.
Right. That's a theme that's come up in this podcast for sure is the strength of connections and networks, authentic connections too. And that's
Mhm.
what I'm hearing about you is they generally are authentic. It's not like you're putting yourself out there and sending a bunch of LinkedIn messages and saying I want to connect and just for the sake of maybe using that individual to get your foot in the door. You have like an authentic view of people that you've worked with and who see something in you, which, like you said, opens the door.
Yeah, I think there can be, by all means, there can be a place for kind of cold messaging people that also
Yes.
says, you're ambitious and you're willing to put yourself out there, but that's definitely not my comfort zone. So yeah, I think leaning on authentic connections and people will, that old saying about like people will remember how you made them feel, and it's very true. Like if you are somebody who, along the way in school don't have a very like cutthroat attitude, but you're willing to help people out and you're welcoming, people will remember that and they'll come back and they'll help you out as well.
Absolutely. So your current work involves brain injury, mental health, and addiction. They're pretty heavy spaces. How do you learn to manage emotional boundaries?
Yeah, so I think this is something I learned along the way for sure. It is heavy work and it's something that I had to adjust to, right? So I'm working kind of as you described and in a very urban setting in one of like the busiest cities. So I do see a lot. And I think the first 6 months on the job, I lost sleep. Like I was having anxious thoughts at night, staying up. It was really difficult. But I think two things helped with that. And I think this is really important for anyone listening who might be considering a career like in a helping profession or just working with people in general. But number one was like at a certain point, acknowledging what I was going through, that, this is affecting, my mind and my well being, and then opening up to others. So friends that I'd graduated OT school with, we meet often and we talk about our experiences, and I think sharing that and being validated by other people was helpful to know that like I'm not alone in what I'm experiencing. And also, I read a book at the time called Help for the Helper. And yeah, it's a book about, how to avoid compassion fatigue and burnout in the helping professions. And again, it just like normalized what I was experiencing. That when you're like in an emotionally involved profession, it's inevitable that you're going to feel some difficult emotions. So I think, yeah, just opening up and validating my experience was important. And then the second thing that I think is important is, yeah, doing the work to set boundaries. That's so important. And as you mentioned earlier, right, like working one-on-one with someone, there's a power imbalance there. Like I'm providing a professional service and they're seeking care. So what really ultimately helped me at the end of the day, and I don't struggle anymore with emotional boundaries, is setting strong boundaries because I know that it's actually the most beneficial for the person I'm caring for, because it avoids them feeling too attached to me or feeling dependent on me. And at the end of the day, that's so much better for their care. So, yeah, I think those two things have been pivotal for me in my well being.
And did you find that was there a big gap between school, what school prepared you for and what the job demanded as it pertains to establishing the emotional boundaries? Was it kind of formalized in school, or was it something that you learned independently along the way? As you mentioned, you did some reading and that sort of thing.
Mhm. I think school definitely sets a foundation for it. Again, we're a regulated health profession, so we have we're governed by law and we have accountability to the public. So the importance of setting very firm professional boundaries was reiterated over and over again, and I think for good reason, because when you actually throw yourself in to the fire, it can be difficult to manage that. And so just having a strong foundation from school, I think setting that standard for ourselves was really important. Without that, I think, yeah, it might have been a bit more of a struggle to figure out, okay, what's my role here? How involved should I be?
Got it. And so boundaries, we're going to take this over to your relationship with Sergio, if you don't mind me asking. So when it comes to both of your academic paths, so just for the listeners, again, Sergio kind of pursued he accomplished getting his PhD. Andrea did undergrad and then master's and is an OT today. When I understand you dated in high school, and I think it's important because there's a lot of young adults that try to manage ambition with relationships. Got Sergio's take a little bit, want to get yours. So how did you both approach, from your perspective, the ambition part while also being there for each other as a couple?
Yeah, I think, both of us came to university sort of with a similar experience in that, university, like both of our families who are like highly intelligent and very successful but didn't have like a history of attending university. So we both kind of came into university a bit naive. Like I'm a first generation Canadian. His family and him came to Canada. We didn't have, strong understanding of like the university environment. So I think having one another to share that with and figure it out together was really helpful, actually, to go through that with someone who kind of also felt a little bit behind in some ways and a little bit lost. Yeah, it was nice to go through that with someone. And I think, during that time, we experienced, any issues that any couple would in terms of, misunderstandings and miscommunications and all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, being able to come back to someone who gets it was really helpful.
Awesome. And were there moments where, I guess I should put it a different way. What helped you stay grounded when you were under pressure? I'm thinking exam time,
Mhm.
submitting deadlines, that sort of thing.
I would love to say that I remained grounded. Think it, especially in the earlier years of university, I think it was really a struggle around that time. I can remember not feeling present with family and friends outside of like a school context. So yeah, with friends at school, we would find time between classes to support each other and to kind of joke around. But I think going back home and then having, family and friend obligations, I don't remember being as present as I could have. And so I think it was a struggle, but what I would say is like, yeah, finding those in between moments to reconnect with like, who am I outside of academics was really important. So leaning on, my hobbies and my interests, and yeah, having friends who weren't in university or weren't at the same one was also really helpful.
Cool. If you were to go back to speak to the Andrea in second year university, what would you tell her?
I would tell her that you don't need calculus. It's okay that you're not doing so good. Um, and yeah, taking it day by day is okay. You don't have to have everything figured out.
What's something you wish students knew about feeling behind?
I think feeling behind is just a really normal feeling because inevitably we're going to compare ourselves to others or wonder if we're doing the right thing. So, anticipating you're going to feel behind sometimes and being okay with that discomfort, I think will help you just get through it.
Good perspective. How do you personally define success right now? And how has that evolved over the years?
Yeah, I think I look at success from, a few different areas. I think about like the different buckets of my life, relationships, career, like leisure and just all the different aspects of who I am as
Mhm.
a person. And I think I feel successful when I feel like I'm giving parts of myself to all of those areas. When there's like a big imbalance, when I feel like I'm neglecting relationships, I don't feel very successful. I don't want to give up like one thing for everything. So, yeah, I think ambition for me looks different now. I want a good balance of, career and family and friendships and being creative. So it's not very easy to achieve a good balance, but if I feel like I'm working towards a balance, that feels successful.
It sounds like a fulfilling endeavor and something that helps you hedge against any one thing. We've seen it times and time again where somebody is completely focused on their career and then one day they're let go, and all these other four things
Mhm.
have been neglected. So then, how does that person interpret losing their career, knowing they've put their identity into it, versus your approach where it's keeping all five balls in the air and not letting any of them drop? I like that.
And I lost an identity, right, when I experienced concussions, and then that was it. Like, I'm no longer an athlete, right? So when you put all of your eggs in one basket, like, things can happen that are outside of your control. So
Mhm.
what defines your identity?
Exactly. What do you find most rewarding about your role today?
Just, I think, yeah, what I find most rewarding is really getting to be like in the grit of people's lives. So I'm seeing people where they're at, like where they live in their own communities, and I'm getting like a real look at what life is like for people. And I'm connecting with them, and I'm being creative at the same time. So I think that's what's
Amazing.
most rewarding. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to get in a bit of a rapid fire here. So you got to answer questions relatively quickly, if you can. If
Oh
you can't,
gosh.
there's no pressure. Ready? What's
Okay.
one habit that keeps you sane?
Sorry, Josh. I'm going to interrupt you. The audio is lagging behind the video.
Oh,
Can you
okay.
speak again?
Yep. What's one habit that keeps you sane?
One habit that keeps me sane is getting outside every day, regardless of the weather, and going for walks around my neighborhood.
Okay. A class or experience you didn't expect to matter but did.
I signed up for an improv class with my best friend in the last year of university, and that ended up changing my life and being amazing.
Coffee, tea, or neither.
Definitely tea. I drink so much tea.
One word you'd use to describe this chapter of your life.
I would say unfolding. Yeah, it feels like things are just starting, and I'm just starting to understand things a bit better. So unfolding, yeah.
Awesome. If a student listening right now feels overwhelmed or unsure, what would you want them to hear?
Yeah, I'd want them to hear that like I was there too. I'm still there oftentimes. I'm proof that you can be someone who doesn't always have a clear sense of direction and what they want to do, but just taking things day by day and not worrying too much about what others are doing and taking time that you need to figure stuff out is all okay. So, yeah, I would just say go at your own pace, expect some discomfort. It's normal.
Great. Andrea, thank you for doing this. We'll bring it to a close now. I really appreciate your patience during this whole ordeal. You've definitely shown patience and compassion and empathy just in this whole technical experience. But I think in our conversation, you certainly have shown that you have a mission and a passion to help people, and it's really inspiring. And I know that listeners will have some good insights from you that they're going to be able to apply to their lives. So, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. And thanks to anyone listening.
All right, that was Andrea. Once again, apologies for the less than flattering video on my part. The themes that came out in Andrea's discussion were pretty big. Not having a clear lane, learning to trust your pace, and building an identity that's bigger than one role. We heard how confidence can come after you start, not before, and how boundaries and community are essential in helping professions. A concept Andrea shared that connects back to an earlier Flashback Files episode, the pressure to pick a lane, is keeping your creativity and playfulness alive as you grow up. Tom touched on this as well in our discussion. If you're in that unfolding season, let this be your reminder. You're not behind, you're becoming. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next one.